Africa is interesting because we're the majority, right? Black people are the majority. It's our government. We elect a majority black government. We've done so for the last 25 years. Of course, the wealth remains in the hands of the white minority, but we have political power, and that has some meaning. But we hedge around managing white anxiety, both within South Africa, but because of the connection between the protections of international whiteness that I spoke about earlier, what happens is white anxiety within South Africa spreads to the global markets, right? So from the very beginning, the South African negotiated settlement was about managing white people's anxiety about what they would lose when apartheid ended. One of the things they were worried about losing was the political power, but the thing that they were really worried about losing was economic power, was their way of life, their privileges. And that hasn't happened, right? Because we extended ourselves, forgave them. But what we really did more than forgive them is that we made the truth and reconciliation process, and this will be interesting for Australians, we made the truth and reconciliation process very narrow. So the reason why apartheid was a crime against humanity is because it was a crime against every single black person who lived in the country. It was an affront against us, right? You couldn't drink at the water fountains, you couldn't live in this area, you were issued a passport for a fake country. We talk about fake news now. South Africa created fake countries, these Bantustans that were not real, figments of the apartheid imagination to say black people belong in tribes that black people had not lived in or belonged to for many years, right? So because of the way that apartheid affected every single black person, it was a crime against black people, it was a crime against humanity. In the TRC process, what we did was we defined crimes as families that had specific human rights violations against them. So what it meant was the hearings and the national process was about forgiveness if someone had been murdered by the police, if someone had been executed, if there was a death or a body or an abduction, which is a much narrower set of people than every single black person who was affronted by the crime of apartheid and who suffered economically as a consequence of apartheid, right? Because there was job reservation, et cetera. So what it's meant is that we negotiated our way into white people's privilege being upheld at the expense of the vast majority of black people, because we never put into the TRC process what we should have, which was, how do we make reparations? How do we calculate the cost of black people continuing to live very far from the economic center? That's what keeps black people in South Africa poor today, right? That you have to spend 60% of your salary every month just in taking transport into the city, because black people were deliberately moved far away so white people didn't have to look at them, right? So these are the inequalities that are entrenched, that are economic, that are a consequence of apartheid, which we never dealt with because TRC, we focused it narrowly on the trauma of your body being beaten, but we were not interested in opening it up too wide because we didn't want the international community, white capital, to be nervous about what that would really mean. If we did proper reparations in South Africa, it would have been it would look like a different country. And so that's what we deliberately excluded from the frame. And this is the problem with reparations in South Africa. So it's a black government, we have political power, but we remain very much hostage to international sentiment, the sentiment of the markets, right? The market guy is so moody, right? And he has the market guy has a particular view on black governments and the capacity of black people to manage money, the wealth of white people in a country like South Africa.